Okay, I don't actually know if this has worked. Has this worked? Am I live? This is a lot more options than Instagram Live, which don't know how I feel about that. But yeah, we're trying reading the weekly texts on YouTube. I think immediately doing it on a laptop is automatically slower. Let me actually try and close down all the things. Also, I think this is such a silly thing, but I look worse on laptop webcam than I look on my phone. For some reason, my phone just really wants to compliment me, and it just makes me look great, but my laptop doesn't care about my feelings. And it's just kind of like, oh, yeah, do you want to look like a rat? Okay, hopefully that will be a bit less clunky. Okay, all right, yeah. If we can live with that, then I'm going to get going. There should be anyone on this. There's no one on this. I don't know if I like that. I quite like having people to chat to, because otherwise I just feel like I'm talking to myself. But maybe actually next time I could do like simultaneous lives, one on YouTube, one on Instagram, and then we could have the chat on Instagram. Maybe there's ways to do this, I guess. But yes, okay, hi. I'm going to be reading Sunday's text, which was not a review, not an essay, not an art thought or anything like that. It was just a text called My Favourite Painter about, you guessed it, my favourite painter, Bhupen Khakhar, who was 20th century Indian painter. There's like a lot of chat about him, like art history remembers him as the first Indian pop artist, which I kind of do and don't see. I don't see it really. I think maybe in my mind I've just got like a different idea of what pop art is, and I think maybe there are like other things kind of coming into that I'm just flying over my head. But that's what he's kind of known as like India's first pop artist. I feel like it's a reductive label as well. I don't know. But that's, I mean, is it reductive? Actually, no, I don't know. It's not reductive. I think it just misses the point. So I don't see that. But then also, fun fact that I didn't know before writing this text was that he was the first Indian artist to come out. So, which blows my mind because he was painting in like the 70s. And I was like, that's crazy. That's like so recent. But yeah, different context, I guess. But yeah, that just really struck me that was like not that long ago, and like a weird milestone. Don't know how to feel about that. But what else? I guess it's worth mentioning that he was the first Indian artist to come out because sexuality was like sex and sexuality. I hate it when people say sexuality. Sexuality, that was a subject that he rendered in his paintings. Not the paintings that I end up discussing. I end up discussing like mostly like landscapey things, but like he was quite like, I'm about to say this in like a clunky way, so I don't mean it like this, but he was like obsessed with painting men. Like men are a returning theme in his work. He paints a lot of men just doing things. And like I think men are the subjects of his paintings. And like, sorry, don't mind the wobbly stool, the wobbly chair. Men are the subjects of his paintings, and yeah, not that like just having them as subjects kind of makes it sexy, but like the paintings get more sexually explicit as he becomes more comfortable in talking openly about his sexuality. It's interesting. But yeah, this isn't like an art historical overview of his entire practice. It's just my favorite paintings by my favorite painter. the ones that I like and vibe with. So like it's very much like a snapshot. It's like a contained moment, not finished, not perfect. And I think if I had written everything about, like if I had managed to write all of my thoughts even into one text, I think I might have killed part of my enjoyment. If that makes sense. I think part of my enjoyment might have been squashed a bit, because sometimes by writing things, I think you can kind of process your feelings, like your love for something out. Like it kind of turns it into words, logic, and like it rationalizes it, right? And when you love something, often the feeling that you have of like the feeling of love that you have for something is like an irrational thing. It can't be like, I sometimes think that I sometimes feel like when I put my feelings in words, they dissolve, or like they get processed out, and like actually I feel things much more deeply when it's just kind of like a felt emotion. It's like a corporeal thing, and like turning it into words kind of like squashes it. So I was scared that that would happen with this, and like with Bhupen Khakhar's work, and that I'd kind of ruin it for myself, because it's happened before. Like I've written about like TV shows and like films and like even like exhibitions that I've really, really loved, and then like found that like after writing about it, I'm like, oh, it feels a bit duller. Not like I don't love them anymore, but like I just feel like, oh, like I'm done thinking about this. Like part of the love that I had for them was this love like of dwelling on like, I've just realized something about myself. This is a moment of self-awareness. Oh my god, we love this live and direct. Like I've just realized this about myself, which is that I think most of the reason, a lot of the things I love them because I don't understand them, or like there's a part of them that like just bamboozles me. Like my favorite book, actually, do you know what? I've got that stupid book downstairs that I should have brought. We probably won't use it. Never mind. But this has turned into show and tell now. Why not? But my favorite book that I've just reread, because I read it for the first time when I was like 18, and I just reread it through like July and August. But it's Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. And like when I first read it when I was like a teenager, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, this is the nuttiest thing. This story is nuts. This is crazy. And like the loopiness of it, like translated into like that love. I loved this story. It was like bonkers, but like the best kind of bonkers. Like it was bonkers in a way that felt like energetic, and like I just really loved it. It was like an amazing book. It like threw me for a loop, and I was kind of like, yeah, wasn't really reading things that were throwing me for a loop. And I've always wondered, it's like, I don't know, it's been 10 years since I read it, and I kind of forgot what it was about, first of all. Forgot why I loved it. I just kind of remember loving it because it was nuts, and I forgot what happened in it that made me feel like it was nuts. And I was like, okay, maybe if I reread it, I'll rediscover that love, or I'll figure out that actually 18-year-old Zarina had really bad taste, and like my taste has moved on, and I'm like, it's not a favorite book anymore, but it still is. It's still like the number one. In fact, it's like renewed that love for it. And I would never ever review this book, because just rereading, like, you know, like Penguin Classics come with that like introduction. Like, this is so battered. Like they come with the introductions. And like a note on the text and whatever. Like just reading that, I felt like myself kind of being like, don't tell me. No, I just want to like feel it within my body. Like I just want to feel the loopiness throwing me for a loop, and I don't want to know why it's like academically like a really good book. It's that thing, like that Thomas Hirschhorn energy yes, quality no way of like reasoning with like an artwork that I'll link that in the description. Actually, that's a good text to have against both this text and like the way that I'm reasoning with the things that I love. But yeah, I just want to feel that love within my body as like an energy, rather than like thinking about the value of these things in terms of their quality, like rather than it being about the value it has for culture at large, that's assigned by gatekeepers. I want it to be about me and my personal reaction and like my subjective kind of gut instinct that kind of goes, oh yes, or oh no. And I think so many of the things that I feel deeply passionate about, like the things I love, not just like or like think were all right, the things that I really love, yeah, I'm always quite protective over them because I think it is that like bodily thing. So was scared writing this text. Long way to say I was scared writing this text because I think I was worried that, yeah, it would rupture something, and it didn't. It's fine. I've still got things left, but I'm going to try and chat through the things that I kind of left out. There are a lot of offcuts in this text, a lot of loose ends that didn't end up getting tied up. So maybe we'll chat through some of them. Maybe I'll just kind of like throw them out there as things that you can consider as like not further reading because that's silly, but maybe rather than me providing as the critic, rather than me providing any like points of resolution, I can just throw these things out there for you to think about, and they can be questions that you answer yourself if you enjoy Bhupen Khakhar's work as well. So not further reading, but like further study, further questions. Questions is the word I'm looking for. Okay. And I will link the actual text version of like on the site in the description as well. I feel like Zoella. I'm like, oh my god, links in the description. Very YouTuber. Like I don't watch YouTube anymore. Like I don't watch YouTube videos. I know Gab does. She like rather than using like Spotify or like Apple Music, she listens to music on YouTube. She watches YouTube videos. Still consumes like content made on YouTube. I do not. So this feels like a very retro throwback moment. But yeah, living the Zoella dream. Okay. But yeah, I'll link the text version if you want to read along while I'm reading. I'm going to get to it. I love lots of things. I love horses. I love clouds. I love dumplings. I love peach flavoured soda. I never think to question why I love these things. I don't want to dissect them. Part of me thinks that interrogation would kill these loves. They are too unstable, irrational, inherent. So don't ask me why I love them. I just do. I love Bhupen Khakhar. Another part of me has wanted to write about why I love Bhupen Khakhar for so long. I have put it off because I'm scared that if I think too much about why, I will burst that love. The love might rupture or deflate around me. The love might dissolve away, and I love loving Bhupen Khakhar. I don't want to not love Bhupen Khakhar. But this pull between loving something knowingly and loving something without question, that is so interesting. The things we love make us, or we love the things we love because of who we are. I can't tell which. But you can tell who or what someone is from the things they love. I am horses, I am clouds, I am dumplings, I am peach soda, and if I am anything else, more than any of those things, I am Bhupen Khakhar. It was June 2016. My boyfriend at the time had a Tate membership. Well, his grandma had a Tate membership. He always borrowed it so we could go to the top floor members cafe and gawk at people down on the riverbank. That was his favourite bit. But I was already an art critic. I wanted to look at art all the time and I wanted to feel something. You Can't Please All was Tate Modern's big summer show that year. Room after room of paintings by Bhupen Khakhar, an artist I had never heard of but felt some weird affinity with. As we walked around, I fell in love. Not with that boyfriend. I had already said I love you to him. I fell in love with the paintings. Love. True love. With each and every painting lined up on the wall in front of me. It was crazy. I didn't know what was happening or how it was possible. I just knew that I was feeling something intense and real. Head over heels, this fluttering in my stomach and chest. I loved them. Truly, madly, deeply. I didn't have the words to explain why. Every time I tried, I came up short. Dumb love, I guess. It felt embarrassing because coming up with the words for why was my job. already an art critic and already stumbling. But it also felt telling. I couldn't figure this love out of my body and into human words. It was pure feeling, gut instinct, animal magnetism. Have you ever tried to explain to someone why you love them? It never quite covers the ground, does it? It always feels a bit silly or flat. The feeling is always bigger than you can express. Bhupen Khakhar was born in Bombay on the 10th of March 1934. He was a Pisces, the last constellation of the zodiac, and a weird sign if you ask me. Pisces are open pores, mutable, romantics, so tender. His family was Gujarati. He was the youngest son. He was never formally trained as an artist. He went to art school for a master's in art criticism, but before that, he trained to become a chartered accountant, and he continued working as an accountant alongside his career as a painter. That choice makes me laugh a bit. I don't know if it was a financial choice or if he just liked having two jobs running parallel. Day as an accountant, night as a painter. Maybe it grounded him in real life. Maybe it was more stable. Maybe he just enjoyed bookkeeping. His painting took him back to his family's home state of Gujarat, though, and he lived and worked in Baroda, where there was a busy community of artists, his friends and peers. He did other things on top of the painting and bookkeeping. He wrote short stories and plays, worked in ceramics and watercolours, made a lot of little flip-out books. My favourites are still his oil paintings. I only mention the other things because I think he sounds like he was an interesting guy as well as a good artist, which is rare. Man eating jellybean. The horizon line sits at the very top of the square canvas. There's only a sliver of sky and it is mostly baby blue. I'm so sorry, that was my stomach rumbling. It is lunchtime. Sorry about the interruption. There is only a slither of sky and it is mostly baby blue. A hilly shoreline bends and tapers off into the sea. There are rolling green hills, baked golden on one side by the setting sun. The sky blushes packet pink above the hills, like the land is leaking or glowing. Beneath the hills, there's a cluster of boxy white buildings with orange roofs. Palm trees and grey rocks, orange sand bulging out into a thin, curved beach. Almost a headland at this angle from across the bay. Between us and all of that, there's a flat, smooth sea. Brilliant cyan blue. It is serene, so calm and glossy. No waves, only patches in slightly different tones that skim across in wide curves. Up close in the foreground, against the very bottom right of the canvas, a man sits at a creamy beige terrazzo table. His face is smooth salmon pink. It is a smooth salmon pink gradient. The shadows are alizarin crimson. He looks like he's being lit from beneath. He's wearing a brown brimless hat and a striped white shirt that shimmers with pasty colour, pale blue, green, pink and yellow. His arms are propped at an angle on the table between us, broad-shouldered with a pointy elbow. His hands are large and strange. The right hand is cradling a thick blue plate with one sweet, a bright orange spiral in a perfect circle. It's a little jellybean. He is holding a second jellybean to his mouth with his left hand. His lips aren't parted. They are thin and dark, sharp like a razor cut. He is separated from the rest of the scene by a bright red railing. Between this side of the bay and the headland on the other side, there is a thin, dark highway. It cuts across the perfect blue plain of the sea, tearing it in two. A car hunkers down in the right lane on its way over to the other side. It is plastered at an odd angle. Actually, all of this painting is at an odd angle. All of it is a bit too elongated, each component stretched out in a different way. It's like looking at something in a dream or with glasses that are ever so slightly the wrong prescription. It's all too flat. The dimensions are too present or not present enough. The surface of each object is too smooth. They all have a sick gradient that makes them feel bubbled and ridiculous and unreal. The space feels airbrushed, empty, distant, new. The angles are all hyperextended. It's not uncanny, but it's also not comfortable. I don't understand it. It's perfect. Like I said, I love lots of things. I don't understand most of them. I love Mughal miniatures and Italian primitives. I love the C&E school. I love that pre-Renaissance, late medieval period, just as perspective is being figured out and artists don't quite know how they want to compose their images. They don't quite know how they want to configure space within the limits of the canvas. It's all up in the air. Anything goes. So composition stretches out and space contracts. Spatially speaking, things start coming undone. I love Henry Rousseau. Taste is funny, isn't it? We all like what we think we like. No, that's not what that says. We all like what we like. Black bean sauce, white trainers, when people have a little pink flush across the high points of their cheeks and across their nose. Ah, I love it. Man leaving, going abroad, 1970. Overwhelmingly teal. A curved landmass like a bubble rising, cupping the sea. Darker teal. Flat except for a steamboat cutting through the water on perfectly wobbled waves. On land, even rows of trees stretch back along the shore. They are spiky, succulent. The leaves are fleshy and solid. They are a dense collective unit, disappearing into the distance, shrinking. One tree stands apart, further forward and bedazzled by little orange fruits. The fruits are pushed out to meet us, prominently thrust forward over the leaves. In the foreground, a hedgerow runs along the very bottom of the square canvas in a straight line. A dense green gradient with leaves and pink lotus flowers painted over the top. Fuck me. Sorry. That sneeze really took me by surprise. Where was I? A dense green gradient with leaves and pink lotus flowers painted over the top. The hedge parts in the middle and forms a curved arch. Two men hold hands underneath it, facing each other. They both have white hair and still blank faces. Around them, the land is minty and smooth. A flat plane of colour that rolls out, streaky in parts, but mostly all-encompassing. It sucks the eye in, making the figures look small and meek. American Survey Officer, 1969. Emerald green everywhere. Trees in a lump, moving up from the middle on a diagonal path. The same pasty succulent leaves, still and perfect against rolling hills. The hills tip down towards the right of the canvas. A small creamy helicopter is perched in a dip. There's a slice of the sea, dark and blue and barely noticeable against the rich emerald. The land spreads out into the foreground at the bottom of the canvas, a threatening flat expanse, nearly empty, so small they are almost swallowed up by the smooth plane of colour. Three figures. They are all wearing suits. One man is facing out to look at us. He's wearing a baby blue suit and round sunglasses. He is blonde. I think he is so glamorous against this blown out landscape, so calm against these rolling hills that are threatening to engulf him. Somewhere deep within the cluster of trees, there's a startling shock of red, like an almost orange, cadmium red. It is glowing out in a circle. I don't understand what it is meant to be. Taste is social. It is constructed on a network scale that is bigger than us as individuals. Taste is irrational. We cannot bend it to our will because it is tied to other things. But Mughal miniatures, Italian primitives, Henry Rousseau, all those things have something in common, don't they? I like images where there's an element of spatial confusion. There's a term for it, pictorial space. It describes a painter's conceit that the two-dimensional plane of a canvas is an illusion, that it is actually capable of conveying depth. There is foreground, middle ground, background, ground beyond and between. Things can come up close and recede back into the distance. It is a lie. I like it when the conceit slips, when a painter reveals their hand. Maybe it's clumsy or clunky. Maybe it fails a bit. Maybe the painter lets you see what they're doing or trying to do. I don't like it when things are seamless. I like the awkwardness, the embarrassment, the shy self-awareness, the nervousness. Blush, cheekbone to cheekbone, bridging the nose. I like the way it feels to see an image flex out in space and for it to feel new or risky. The anxiety of not knowing whether it will work this time. Tiger and Stag, 1970. A rectangular canvas hung portrait. From the top down, a viridian green plain, flat expanse. Grey hills bulge up and out of the green. They part in the middle to reveal a complex fort, pink and red and white with powdery blue shadows. A blue rectangular pool spreads out flat, overlooked by the fort's domed roofs. Across the canvas, a dense patch of leaves all tangled in a curve, then more hills, grey fading into minty green. Some of the hills are inclined so steep they dive up almost vertical. The light catches them pale and sickly. There's something about mint green. It's a colour that makes me feel nauseous. The fort, the trees and the hills, they're all connected by red roads. This severe network of thin, sharp lines that carves up the flat green expanse. At the bottom, underneath all this towering imagery, almost lost amongst it, a tiger and a stag. The stag is fleeing off to the left. The tiger is mid-pounce, baring its teeth. Its tongue is lolling out. Its nose is scrunched up and short, round head crunched up in movement and menace. Its body is stretched out and pot-bellied. The stag is straight-faced. Its eyes are forward, almost rolling. Its tongue is flopping out of its mouth too, but in a bored way. Its head is small, body inflated and cow-like. Its legs are prancing spindles. It's my favourite bit. The stag and the tiger are lost in the landscape and also blown out by it. They dominate the image and disappear into the baggy folds of hill road and trees. They are nowhere and foreground. There is no horizon line. I love this painting because it is tense. It is taut. It is unstable. The composition of this painting contains friction. In 1972, Bhupen Khakhar had an exhibition at Gallery Chamold in, I think that's how you say it, Chamold, in Bombay. He made a catalogue to accompany the show. Truth is beauty and beauty is God. There's a weird and wonky biography that includes a full family tree and describes his past life as a butterfly that died when it threw itself into a saint's lit candle. Then he offers short texts to explain each painting in the exhibition. About Tiger and Stag, he wrote, "The background of the painting is done with a two-dimensional attitude, while the foreground is done with a three-dimensional attitude. These two sections of the painting are joined by a crimson road. This joining looks awkward, out of place, and is an unsuccessful attempt to fill up the space." According to art history, Bhupen Khakhar admired and studied Mughal miniatures, Italian primitives, the work of Henry Rousseau. Maybe that's the source of this weird affinity I feel with him. We have similar taste. They called Henry Rousseau a modern primitive. Like Bhupen Khakhar, Rousseau was self-taught and came to painting relatively late in life. Before being an artist, he was a customs inspector. Modern primitive was a term that understood. His visual language sat outside the conventions of formal training or received wisdom. It was naive, sincere, deadpan, stiff, but all on purpose. Apparently, it's called gaucherie. Gaucherie. Not sure how you say that either. Awkwardness. That awkwardness is a visual device. It opens up new possibilities for staging a narrative or making depth within a flat image. It gives things a tense and nervous energy. It also makes things feel still, not just in the way images are always still, but in an artificial way, like something has been called to attention. The friction of this nervous, still energy, it makes space turn into a kind of liquid. Howard Hodgkin's house on hand-painted cushion, 1979. Square canvas dominated by a powdery blue. It's a dizzying expanse, and then it falters. Most of it is flat colour, but at the edges there are little wrinkles, like fabric pinching, tacked on. It's just oil paint though. Down the bottom, there's a little lozenge-shaped vignette. It's bordered by a red ribbon with this satin sheen. The landscape contracts within this contained oval. A yellow house, a winding river, flat green lawn shining under a grey sky. We can only see the smallest gash of sky, but it is gunmetal grey. The house is in the middle of the vignette and it bulges out at us. The rest of the landscape warps to hug the ribbon border. The river caresses the bottom. The fields sweep round on the right and the path widens out to obscure where things end on the left. I think this is a perfect painting. Everything is smooth, edgeless. It surrenders itself to open space, flat field of colour. It interrupts itself and slits itself open, wrinkle and vignette. Space has turned itself inside out, and now everything is leaking across the canvas. It has turned landscape into a work of fiction, a dream, a liquid. I think it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And that's the end of the text. It's a bit of an abrupt ending. I think I don't think I wanted to like give it like a proper ending. Part of that open-endedness or like that kind of firm cut of like that abruptness was like, I don't know, I think protective. I still wanted to kind of like keep some things held back, some things unsaid. So I think abrupt ending on purpose. But if you would like to look at any of the paintings, then obviously Google is your friend, but they are embedded on the page that the review is on. The review page, they're on the review page where the text is. They're embedded in the text. So if you want to read the descriptions and have a visual reference rather than just my descriptions alone, then they're there. What did I miss talking about? I think there's a lot that I didn't mention. I think I just spoke about space and like Bhupen Khakhar's use of space, because I feel like that is what I kind of enjoy the most. But there is like also like an aesthetic. There's an aesthetic aspect to the energy that I feel from his paintings, and I think with the ones that I wrote about, it's a bit more spatially loopy. But there are others where the space is a bit more resolved or a bit more straight cut, and there are other things going on that I still like those paintings, but didn't get a chance to like loop them in. This could have been a dissertation. And I think with some of his other work, he's deploying kitsch as an aesthetic tool, or like a visual device, right? Like he's using low culture, or I'm cringing as I say low culture, but that's kind of like what kitsch does on purpose. It's like taking elements of like low culture and turning it into like high culture, or like using the aesthetics of high culture to condition low cultural whatever. That's kind of like the point of kitsch. And I think the way that Bhupen Khakhar does it is interesting, because he uses the aesthetics of kitsch and kind of creates something that's like this weird, it's not kitsch really, not really, but it kind of is. And I think this makes sense if you know some of the other things that I write, kind of like both in and outside the white pube. But the last piece of art I made was a performance about how kitsch was like fundamentally the aesthetic and a subaltern. It was kitsch was very Indian basically, and I wrote about kitsch in relation to like those WhatsApp cards, those WhatsApp greetings cards, and it was a performance because I like yelled this essay into a microphone while my cousin was playing the drums behind me. It was like a whole thing. It was like, I say essay, I yelled the essay. It was a sermon. Like, there's a reason I don't make art anymore, because that was a mess, but funny. And yeah, I think I'm still like trying to figure out how I feel about kitsch as an aesthetic language. Aesthetic language, kitsch as a thing, right? I'm still trying to figure out why I feel this like this magnetic energy around kitsch, and like I want to think about and write about kitsch, and like if there are works that have or like deploy an element of kitsch, I'm like automatically drawn to them. There's something about that, and I don't know what that is, but Bhupen Khakhar uses kitsch. That's part of his aesthetic language. So I'm just going to read through some of the offcuts because maybe this is actually interesting to hear the bits that got cut out that like aren't resolved. That's part of why we do these readings, I guess, so that we can kind of drop the veil, like rather than thinking about a review as like a perfect finished object, like the text as like a pristine object. Like you get to see it as something that has like facets and other angles and other potential possibilities that, like, you know, in other parallel universes maybe I would have resolved these things on time, or like I would have feel less of a type of way about making this 9,000 words, and I'd have just written my dissertation, you know. So that, yeah, the text isn't a perfect finished pristine object. These are the things that fell out along the way. So I'll read them ish. So about kitsch, the notes say that's part of his aesthetic language. Sure, maybe it's hard, in fact, the way that he takes these middle class signifiers. In some of the paintings there's like he's painting like home interiors, but like fancy home interiors, and like shopkeepers, and he's painting basically domestic scenes of like middle class life. The way he takes these middle class signifiers and paints them seriously, deadpan. Kitsch is the aesthetic language of the petit bourgeois, after all. That's what makes it tasteless. It's stuck in the middleness. Its open aspiration and desperate desire for good taste, the way it employs artifice and falls flat and fails anyway. It's an aesthetic of failure, but failure that has become a thing itself and altogether. Like I said, they're notes, so like please don't felt like this overwhelming like embarrassment as I read that, because it's just like, ooh, that's not how I want that to sound. But I guess there's something to be said, yeah, there in I guess the politics of kitsch as an aesthetic, like it being the aesthetic language of the petit bourgeois. That's kind of why it like feels like low culture, right? Because within a Marxist lens, within a Marxist lens, like high culture is produced at either end of the spectrum by like, you know, it's produced at either end of the spectrum, and the petit bourgeois stuck in the middle kind of like have this weird, tasteless, middling exclusion from that, like center and margin. They're like between power, right? Not quite at the reins of it, but it's, yeah, maybe it's not Marxist, maybe it's just about like relationships to power and like the way that power and aesthetic production works. That's a fucking clever thought. Bet you that makes no sense. But yeah, I think that's my feelings around kitsch just will never be resolved. I delivered an hour-long sermon thinking about this, and just your guess is as good as mine. I think there's something about the way that Bhupen Khakhar uses kitsch that I find interesting, and I think he uses it in a similar way to those like WhatsApp greetings cards, where it's like knowingly deployed artifice purely, and he balances it out. And I think there's part of the reason why that kitsch is so compelling within his work is because it's balanced against the spatial confusion, like the sparse, open, flat landscapes that are just like pure fields of color. And then like even the tiger and the stag, kind of the way that they're rendered is a bit kitsch. Like the way that they end up looking is, it feels kitsch because it's using like the language of like popular painting and like popular popular imagery. Like it kind of, it takes on, maybe that's like the pop artist bit, right? The way that the tiger and the stag are rendered kind of feels like it fits into like advertorial or like advertorial illustration, that aesthetic language, and that's kitsch and also knowingly deployed. You get me? And then it continues. Maybe it's in the way he uses soft gradients to make us see something fleshy or succulent. Maybe it's in the way he uses color, the way it all feels a bit cloudy or like white has been cut in, that soft blur of lens glare or pixelation. But then he zooms out, makes it sparse. He inserts blank fields of color like those Mughal miniatures. He engages with flatness as a way to make kitsch scarce, to spread it thin. Yeah, exactly what I just said. I thought my own thought and thought that it was the first time I thought that thought. The idea of kitsch is so loaded. Low art, poor taste. It is shit, sweet, crappy, and so bad. Something to be indulged in, never exercised knowingly. It is naive, never knowing. It is all of these things because it is everywhere. It is popular. Again, really unresolved bits of text there. I think there's something else about kitsch that is in the wrong place. So maybe I'll go find it. Chemical color, saturated and impure or too pure, like synthetic flavor, peach flavored soda. I think there's something about his use of color. I mean, I don't know if he's using things straight out of the packet, but there is like a way, like a pure color, like a hyper saturated syntheticness to the way that the color looks in real life. I'm aware that like on a screen backlit, it looks slightly different, and in print, in the little like coffee table book that I've got flicking through, it looks a bit different. But in real life, the colors are like, I remember thinking at the time, like, oh my god, I just want to lick these, like I want to lick the color off them. There was something like synthetic, hyper saturated, but also like just mind-boggling about them and the way that he uses color. And I don't know for sure if he's using things straight from the packet or if he's like mixing it himself, but it's just, there's something about that feels tied to kitsch and also the use of space. I don't know, unresolved. There's another point as well that I don't know where this fits, and I don't know where this sits against the other things as well. I don't know where this fits into the text, where this sits against the other thoughts. I don't even know how I feel about this, but it's just the thing that I'm thinking, that I thought while I was writing this, and that I kind of feel like it's a thought, unresolved. But Bhupen Khakhar is also called a narrative painter. Like his paintings are narrative paintings. It's a genre, right? It's a painting genre, narrative painting. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what narrative painting was, and basically I found out that it's just all paintings. Basically, not really, but like all paintings, if you like are flexible enough with the category, kind of fit into narrative paint. You know what I mean? I'll read that bit because you might not know what I mean. But okay, I didn't know that there was a term for this. Narrative painting, a painting that tells a story. It is either a snapshot, a moment in time, frozen in tableau, or it is a sequence of events that unfold, montage and action. It feels like a silly term, banal, parochial, trite. Just couldn't decide which one of those words to use, so threw all of them in there. Figured I'd make a decision eventually. I think I hate it. It tells a story. Isn't that just a way of describing the way every image secretly functions? Aren't images meant to tell stories? Isn't that their entire purpose? That must be so casual and slapdash for them being images, like the way we burn calories by just lying down, being alive. That is the whole point of them. Images and narrative both occur in space and fold in time. That doesn't make sense, does it? Both occur in space and fold in time. And unfold in time, I think is what I was trying to say. An image is not just a static thing. It leaks and bleeds out. It spills into ourselves as we behold it. Everything is narrative. Everything is a story. If it's not, then it is just an object. And I guess there's like more things to be said about theory, right? The difference, the split between image and object, and whether an image is an object, whether object is a completely different category. I was about to say ontological category, not ontological, but like one of those ogicals, like taxonomy, whether it exists with, maybe that's what I'm thinking, right? Like maybe image and object, there's a taxonomy, a hierarchy there between those two categories. And I don't know the words. And then I started talking about like what narrative painting actually was, but like didn't ever write the first sentence to lead into it. So I just kind of wrote, it's Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People, it's Millet's Ophelia, it is every Hogarth and the Bayeux Tapestry, it is the Potato Eaters, it is everything. Simultaneous, scenic, continuous, synoptic, panoramic, progressive, sequential. Never resolved that thought. And good. Maybe it was like a really pretentious thought. Maybe then other pretentious thoughts that I kind of didn't ever manage to resolve into like a neat enough shape to include them was that like by zooming out or like by playing with space, Bhupen Khakhar expanded the pictorial field around and beyond the subjects, constructing a genre about everyday life, the provincial, the banal. Is that pastoral, long distance, panoramic, diminutive scale, the charade of the everyday? Hate that. And there's something about Bruegel in there, in amongst that, as like an art historical reference to lay parallel. And I think maybe that has something to do with the subject of his work, like men and their work, and the way it shapes the world at large. That obsession with men, right? Not just sexual, or not just about sexuality, but it's also kind of, about the way the world works at large. Maybe critical, but also I think there's something about, that use of space within that, the way that pictorial space is expanded and blown out. That ties into other thoughts about subject. And then I think there's another point about the Italian primitives, the Sienese school and Sienese painting. In that pre-Renaissance, late medieval time period, like there's Sienese, it just says there's the correspondence between the treatment of urban landscape and pictorial space between Sienese painting and Mughal miniatures. I think there definitely is, the two kind of correspond, and there is, I believe that there is evidence that paintings from that time period in Siena, where the Sienese school were active, like Ambrosio Lorenzetti, Simone Martini, Duccio, and like all of those Sienese school guys, there's evidence that their paintings traveled along the Silk Road to India, and that Mughal court painters were looking at these paintings as like visual references, that there was like a kind of before the internet, people didn't see images, right? That would like blow their mind, and it would be like, whoa. They would be subjects of study, and I guess there's evidence of like, conversation between those two threads in art history. They're not actually that separate, not that different. The world is a smaller place than we think. Sienese depiction of urban space lays it flat, folds angles at strange and disjointed hinges. It's the way urban space feels when you are within it. Is it? I don't know if that's true. I think that's probably why that never got included, because that's still related to space. But then it goes on to say the way that you can see around a corner that you know. What does that mean? I think as well, it's worth me saying that I actually have written about Bhupen Khakhar's work and this show, You Can't Please All, before. And so there are bits of notes where I've tried to resolve like my earlier thoughts from 2016, when I wrote the review of the show. It was like hard. It ended up being only like a paragraph, because back then we were writing really short reviews. and I wrote about how Indian painting is like obsessed with flatness. It was art ahistorical. Like there was just no like understanding of art history within that, which is fine. That wasn't really what I was writing about, but I was trying to like think about it through the lens of art history, and it was just like a bad review. I would not recommend going back to read it because there is nothing of worth or value that like I've not resolved within this text there. But I think there is a thought that I would probably like to flag now to like round this off. That there is a balance between narrative and structure, composition. How do you tell a story and make an image that has legs? Often narrative painting takes a frozen moment or bends the image around itself to tell itself in a sequence. How do you lay everything out, like the contents of your pocket on a table? And that was actually one of the things that I really kind of dwelt on when I was writing this review in 2016. The fact that like these are images that put the contents of their pocket on the table, that there is everything kind of contained within them, and it's like flat lay, right? And I think that has so much to do with that like early loopy pre-Renaissance, late medieval kind of that Sienese school, Mughal miniatures, all of that, like the spatial loopiness, right? It's this unstable moment in time where artists are figuring out how to compose an image and how to tell a story within that image, and like how many things can they fit in the image and still kind of like do what they want to do with composition, right? When you're trying to balance narrative and composition, and you're doing something outside of formal convention, something tense happens in trying to balance those things, I think, and trying to see painters, come to points of resolution and like resolve these things for themselves is really interesting. And I think that's where new things happen. That's where new exciting things happen. That's where painting becomes radical again, you know, like what perspective was like the single biggest thing that changed the shape of like European painting, like the biggest innovation in European art history. And then yet again, like the deconstruction of perspective was like the single biggest thing, second single biggest thing that happened, that made people call for the death of painting, or stopped people calling for the death of painting. Like when you kind of break apart convention, I think that's when and you try and like come to these points of resolution by striking a balance that makes sense to you rather than to formality, convention, the way things are done, right? The academy, the way things are taught, received wisdom. When you try and strike that balance for yourself as a painter, I think that's when risk happens. But risk is, exciting. It has energy. It is something that I fundamentally probably like seeing, even if it's unsuccessful, even if it failed, because I think it's interesting to read that. It's interesting to read Bhupen Khakhar's own analysis of that painting Tiger and Stag, where he says that it's an awkward attempt to fill the space and it's unsuccessful. Because if he thinks it's unsuccessful, I still think that the image is great, and I like that it contains like a kind of failure. I like it for the failure, I think. I don't know. Yeah, no, I like it for the failure. I like it for the fact that there's an element of, there's a disjointed, awkward feeling for this, to the space, that it's not filled or balanced or like happily composed, that there's like a kink in the chain. I think that's what makes that painting one of my favorites. Or that's what makes me make it, that's what makes me like it more than I like some of his others. But this is now nearly going on an hour. I can fucking chat for ages about this, but I'll leave it there, even though I probably have other things to say and I could natter on. I'll leave the link to that Thomas Hirschhorn workshop text that Gab wrote, thinking between energy, yes, quality, no, because it's an interesting way to think about artwork. And I think that's primarily the language that I've been using, like maybe engaging with the idea of quality, like, you know, these things all art history, like whatever, the academy, but like it's just fundamentally it's about the energy, right? Like fuck quality, like what says it has quality? Other people, like gatekeepers, curators, critics, art historians. I want to reason with these works in terms of their energy rather than their quality. And so I'll leave that down below because it could be an interesting read, and I'll leave the actual text version of this, the review, down in the description. How do I end this now? Oh, I pressed the big fucking red button that says end stream. All right, bye.